Hello, I'm Eric,
Hi, I'm Sydney.
and this is Hallmark Mysteries.
And more.
Well, hello, John. It's a pleasure to have you here. I was not expecting to talk to you again so quickly after last time, but some things happened.
Things happened.
Things happened.
That's the nature of life. Things happen.
Yes, it is. So I think probably we're going to talk about Mystery 101. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the world of the writers and the Writers Guild. And I've seen a lot of the posts you've been sharing. You guys are on strike now. And
No, we're not on strike yet. We're not on strike yet. And we actually, to be clear, we don't want to go on strike. The Writers Guild of America does not want to go on strike. What we have done as members at an overwhelmingly large rate, in fact, it's our biggest ever vote in this direction, where we vote on what's called strike authorization. So the full membership has a vote in which we decide yes or no, do we want to authorize our negotiating committee to strike? And so we actually voted over 97% in favor of authorizing the negotiating committee. And the reason we did that is to give the negotiating committee leverage, because just so in case people don't know what's going on right now in Hollywood, in this multi-billion-dollar industry that is essentially an industry of storytelling, right? I mean, fundamentally, Hollywood is an industry of storytelling. We, the storytellers, also known as the writers, I mean, of course, obviously, film and television are incredibly collaborative arts. We should say that from the get-go. We can't do this work without actors and directors and production designers and costume designers and sound recordists and teamsters and so many people and producers and executives and all of these people. We can't do the work, but the work begins with the script. That's the story. That's the blueprint for the making of the story. And so right now, our contract that we have with all the studios, Amazon, Apple, Paramount, NBC Universal, Warner Brothers, right? Our contract is coming up and where it needs to be reevaluated. And, just a few years ago, this contract comes up periodically every few years. And a few years ago, we actually authorized in favor of strike, and the strike was able to be averted. So, I think probably 97% of my fellow writers are hoping that this strike gets averted. But that's not really up to us. That's really up to the studios if they are going to meet our incredibly reasonable terms to be paid fairly, to be compensated fairly, mostly in the streaming world, mostly in the world where things stream, because the business has changed a lot since we last negotiated a contract, and we just want to make sure that we're compensated fairly so that we can live. None of us want to be paid $20 million a year like the co-CEOs of Netflix are making, as it was just announced last week. These two guys, each one of them is making $20 million. Right.
Well, you wouldn't hate it if they forced you to take it.
I wouldn't, but
right.
It's not what we're after. We're after is honestly just to be solidly middle class, hardworking employees, people who work hard to create, to do what we love, which is create these stories. So that's where we are right now, and our wonderful negotiating committee is locked every day in a conference room with the people from the AMPTP, which is the producer, the studios, with their representatives, trying to hammer out an equitable contract, a fair and equitable contract that we can all agree will keep things going, because we don't want to kill theatrical movies. We don't want people to not get their next season of their favorite show. We don't want that.
Right.
But again, it's not really up to us. And all we've done by authorizing yes for the strike is give our negotiating committee leverage. And we will strike if we don't get a deal by midnight on Monday, May 1st.
So it's coming right around the corner.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's Monday, May 1st at midnight. We will go on strike, and we will do it. And I've done it before.
Yeah, you've been around a couple of years.
And it's
so
nobody wants to do it. I
Right.
just really want to be clear. None of us want to do it, but we have to do it if, because, it's the law of cause and effect, right? So,
Right.
so we have to create a cause if we want to have a positive effect. So.
Well, you shared some things, and I've watched the videos, and I won't claim to really understand, but just getting like a little snapshot. But I mean, this is some of the basic things, like basic healthcare type things. Or the other was from going back a little bit, how it seemed like they were trying not to give you guys any of the residuals for streaming, of which we know what streaming is now. And it just, so you're right, I do see where you're coming from. And from, what I've been seeing is that all you're really, it seems like, is trying to keep up with the times and not let that piece of the pie, keep
that's correct
shrinking, and just sort of maintain your piece of the pie.
Right.
Which is growing.
That's right. I mean, that's what's so mind-blowing about the fact that we don't have a deal yet, is we're not asking for anything other than normal inflation, I mean, the normal rate of growth,
right?
Compensation. And again, just to be clear, who we're asking this from, I don't know if you've heard of these companies: Amazon, Netflix, Apple.
I think I read something when I was in
Discovery,
deep reading.
Discovery,
Amazon,
Time Warner,
the little company,
Paramount, NBC Universal. I mean, so for these guys to suggest that they're not really making enough money to pay us. And by the way, we're the first, sort of the first wave, if you will, of artists who are going to be negotiating with these committees. So that's why we're the tip of the spear. We're really important. And that's why SAG-AFTRA, which are the actors, the DGA, the Directors Guild of America, the directors, and IATSE, which are the Teamsters, who are like, just so incredibly important. I mean, they're the people that get everybody where they need to go.
Right.
And all of these unions have all lined up behind us and said, we will not be crossing the picket line. We will not be working.
So they all support. So they de facto essentially go on strike too.
Yeah. So they're essentially, I mean, obviously there are contracts. If an actor has a contract, they have to contractually fulfill and finish that contract, but they're not going to do new work, stuff like that.
Right.
So,
okay.
And that's there's power in a union. And of course, I know there are some people who might even be listening to this podcast who think, oh, I don't like unions, and I think the reason that people don't like unions historically is because unions are run by human beings, and sometimes human beings are prey to corruption. And there has definitely been corruption in unions. But I can proudly say, as a member of the Writers Guild of America, we are not a corrupt union. There's no graft. There's none of the nonsense going on. And unity, union and unity are the same thing. So how can you possibly be against unity? So anyway.
Well, I come from Detroit, so I'm very versed on the good and the bad of unions.
Yeah, and of course there's bad about unions, but I think our union, the Writers Guild of America, is such a honorable union who has really honestly done really, really good things for its membership. And I'm so proud to be a member of the WGA.
Well, part of the reason why I want to bring this up is because when we talk about Mystery 101, it's just a reminder that behind these great stories, there is a business.
Sure.
And we do have to remember that. And as fans, we tend to see that final product and kind of think that it just sort of magically happens out of the goodwill of everybody because, Christian Plummer, he just has these great stories that he just wants to give away. But no, you need to put some food on the table too. So, we understand that. And, Christopher and Amy, same thing. They need to make a living. And and we do get all of that. So all right. So as I said, it was about a month ago that we were talking, and we one of the things we wanted to say is ask, a few questions about Mystery 101 and the history. And we briefly talked about episode 8. And, we were frustrated it hadn't happened, but at the same time, we were all optimistic. Eventually it was going to happen. And we've now discovered it's not going to happen. So us as fans were, I would say, shocked. Also, some of us probably not quite surprised. I think more the way that it happened was a little bit startling, and I think Hallmark would agree, probably not the best way of doing that, but the news. Now, did you know a little bit beforehand, or did you find out like the rest of us from the comment on a comment?
I got the call on Friday.
Okay, so you had a little heads up.
Yeah. Okay. And I was asked if I would, post about it once I got the green light, and so yeah.
Okay, probably not the best one, but once again, we talked. There is a business.
Yeah, I mean,
things happen.
Yeah, things happen. I mean, I don't think it's terribly. It's not wonderful or joyful for the fans to get too obsessed with the way in which information is delivered. It's a human business, and there's human error, and I think that's all we really need to say.
All right. Have you talked to Chris, Amy, and any of the other staff or the
Jill,
executives?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Of course. I talked to my producer, and she's the one who gave me the news. And I talked to Chris. I've been in touch with Jill. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So just a sort of universal sadness, but you know what? We're on to bigger, better, new things, right?
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's a loss. I mean, when there's a loss, there's sorrow. And it's important to acknowledge that and be real about it. And so that's certainly real for me. But at the same time, what was the quote I sent you, Eric?
Oh, right. I have that actually coming up, the Agatha Christie.
Yeah. Do you want to share it now?
You know what? I have it as building into the end.
All right.
We will do it. I think it was fantastic.
No, you can say it later. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, sadness, but again, life. I mean, the nature of life is that things, nothing really ends. It simply transforms. And as a Buddhist, I know you and I have talked about my practicing SGI Buddhism, but that's really, science has verified that, right? Even in a black hole, matter isn't destroyed. It transforms into something else. So I find that that's such a much more helpful and beneficent way to look at even death, even the death of a loved one or a family member. You have to look at their life as transforming, not being over. Nothing's over.
Well, it's actually a great segue into what my next question was going to be, and was that you're very focused or vocal about being an SGI Buddhist or practicing SGI Buddhism, and you've been nice enough to share some information as I've asked you some questions about it. And two things have really stuck out with me about the teaching of it, and one of them is the resiliency that it seems to preach, as well as the acceptance. And it's kind of what you were just talking about. And there's the quote of, true happiness means forging a strong spirit that is undefeated, no matter how trying the circumstances. And I apologize if I get his name wrong. Daisaku
Ikeda. Yeah.
Ikeda. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I just really, as I was going through that, and I know you do your chanting, it just seems like a lot of the teachings of SGI Buddhism really would be fantastic for people as they're dealing with this grief and trying to accept it. Is there, you just shared one of them about how nothing really ends. Can you share a little bit more? Maybe some of the, not that we're trying to convert everyone, during this podcast,
Oh.
but I think there are some really good tenets in there that really can help people with this, because like you said, people are experiencing grief. I've been shocked, but they are experiencing grief.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best. Right. So thank you. And thank you for giving me a chance to speak about it. I mean, I started practicing Buddhism about 27 years ago. And initially, I was incredibly reluctant and resistant to do it. In fact, I had been introduced to it about 37 years ago by a friend of mine in college, and I actually tried to get him to stop practicing this Buddhism. And fortunately, he didn't. And then he eventually introduced this young woman who I eventually started dating, and then we eventually got engaged, and then we were due to be married. And she said she'd like to have a Buddhist wedding ceremony. And I said, no, I didn't want to do that, because we'd already planned a big wedding. It was going to be non-denominational and everything. And she said, well, it's really important to her. Why was I being so reluctant? We could just have a very simple ceremony at the New York Culture Center, the SGI Culture Center in New York City. And why was I being so reluctant and resistant? And I actually, because she asked me that question, I actually had to answer it, and I realized as we walked for several blocks in silence together that the only real answer I had to that question was that I was afraid. And I didn't really know what I was so afraid of. And that was troubling to me. And so I said, okay, let's do it. But I want to know what I'm doing. And she said, okay, great, we can start tomorrow. And I thought that meant we would study books, because I love to study. Obviously, I'm a literate person and I love to read and study. But in fact, what she meant was we would chant together for the first time for me. And we chant. And so the practice of chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, that's what we chant, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which is the title of the Lotus Sutra. But of course, it's much more than that. And it's really hard to even explain what it is to people until they try it. And we chanted for like 15 minutes, and I just can't even explain to you. It was a really transformative thing. And of course, this was 10 years of, I knew about it. I'd heard Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I'd heard people chanting. I'd heard her chanting. We lived together. I'd heard her chanting every morning for like 2 years. But me doing it changed. Something in me shifted. And I said, I really want to do this for my life. And in fact, we did end up getting married at the Culture Center. And today, literally, as you and I are speaking, April 27th is our 27th wedding anniversary.
I saw your post this morning.
Yeah. So, and of course, all of that is to say, so by the way, you start practicing Buddhism and it's not like all your problems go away. In fact, so this is what I would suggest to you, is that one of the which gets at your question about resilience and acceptance, is that what I love about Buddhism is Nichiren Daishonin, who's the first person to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. He was a 13th century Japanese Buddhist reformer. He was a person trying to get back to the roots of Buddhism, because Buddhism had become so esoteric. It would become, really obsessed with formalities and priests and monks and nuns and all this, you have to do these things. And he was saying, well, that's not working, because we're miserable. And the goal of Buddhism is for people to become happy. But here in this country, we're all miserable. This is, again, in the 13th century. And so he studied and studied and studied. And he said, I think the heart of the Buddha's teaching is the Lotus Sutra, which says that every person is the Buddha, every person, no matter what. And that it's the lotus because it grows in a muddy pond. So that's, and it's the most beautiful flower. I mean, it's this extraordinary flower, but it grows in mud. And that's a metaphor for our lives. We all have to deal with struggles and challenges and problems all the time. That's the mud. But what can we can, like the lotus flower, we can suck incredible nutrition out of the swamp and become this extraordinary thing, this lotus. And so Nichiren said, you don't even have to study the whole Lotus Sutra, right? Because a lot of people in Japan at that time were illiterate. He said, you don't even have to know how to read. All you actually have to do is say the title, Myoho Renge Kyo. just recite that title. But then he added Nam, which is the Sanskrit word for devotion, right? Namu, and like namaste that people say. So Nam means, I devote myself to this wonderful law of cause and effect through sound. That's what literally Nam-myoho Renge Kyo means. Cause and effect is lotus. Renge means lotus flower, but that symbolizes cause and effect because the lotus seeds and fruits at the same time. It's the only flower that does that. So that's the simultaneity of cause and effect. Anyway, forgive the lecture here, but the point, the essential point of what Nichiren was getting at and what we experience when we chant is we transform poison into medicine. We transform mud into lotus flowers. We transform suffering into joy. And that's why I've been doing this for 27 years, is because it's this really pragmatic tool, if you will, but that also has a community, right? Our SGI Buddhist community that I'm, connected to, and, anybody can get connected to, is such a wonderful community. But the reason it's a wonderful community is because it's based in this idea of changing poison into medicine, or doing what we call human revolution, which is that there's really no obstacle that we cannot turn into an opportunity. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's, it gets back to, I think that what you're getting at is people are seeing just the negative of the show getting canceled, but you know what? It's an opportunity too.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
may
and
not,
again,
we may not see it
not
today.
and I don't want to paper over the sadness. This is the great
Right.
thing about chanting, is like when we go, when I first started chanting, I thought, well, I should only chant when I'm in a good mood, right? Or I should only chant when I'm like chill. But that's not correct. In fact, you should chant just, Daisaku Ikeda says, chant just as you are. So if you're angry, chant angry. If you're sad, chant sad. And there will be times when I'll be sitting here chanting and I'm, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo sounds like I'm yelling and screaming. There are times when there are tears streaming down my face out of sorrow. I've gone through, as we all do, I've gone through lots, since I've been practicing Buddhism, my brother dying suddenly, and then my sister dying, and so I've experienced loss, of course, but we all do. Who doesn't? Who among us? What human being has not experienced loss? So it's not to paper over those things and say, oh, just get over it. No, that's not the way Buddhism works. It's to say, no, dig deep into the mud that you have right now. So if you feel crappy, that's fine. Feel crappy, but use it to create value. Soka, so our organization SGI stands for Soka Gakkai International. Gakkai means society, so we're a society, we're a community. But Soka means value creation, and that's the fundamental determination that we make as Buddhists, is how can I create value? I'm going to create value. No matter what, I'll create value from this. So that's what I would encourage people to do. It's don't run away from your pain or your suffering or whatever, but dig deep into it and use it to create value.
Okay. I love it. Like I say, I'm really appreciative of everything you have shared with me. And I do think it just, for me at least, and by no means am I saying I'm becoming a practicing Buddhist or SGI Buddhist by any means, but I have found it does provide just a great comfort, and it does that, like I say, that acceptance, just things are going to be okay. It just, it's
absolutely.
So like I say, so I think whether you're topical or like myself or you, who's truly practicing, I do think there's a lot of value in it. And we may have some people who are very strong believers in another religion who would find it like, I can't do that because of my other religious beliefs. I don't think so. I can definitely compliment, like,
it's not 100%. In fact, I have a really good friend who's used to be a screenwriter, and he then became an Episcopal priest, and I got to know him, and he wanted to he reached out to me because he wanted to talk about screenwriting, because he wanted to try to reactivate that part of his life. But then he found out I was a Buddhist, and he said, I want to talk about Buddhism. And so I taught him how to chant, and he started coming to our meetings, and he loved it. And, he eventually became, just a few months ago, he became an SGI member, which means he received his gohonzon, which is the object that we focus on when we're chanting. It's a beautiful mandala, which means a cluster of blessings. It's an inscription, a replica of what Nichiren inscribed. And so he's an Episcopalian. He's a Christian. I mean, he's literally a professional. He's a priest, but he's also chanting every day. He loves it. So there's no, we don't have those kinds of Buddhism always says, rather than look at this or that, let's look at both. Why don't we combine, so yeah.
All right. So we were talking about the pain and, some of the grief that people have to do. Were you surprised at, I'm guessing you have seen through, social media, some of the people's reactions. Have you surprised at the extent that this has impacted people's lives? Like, people are calling in sick from work. People are crying. The DMs we have gotten of people who literally, you feel like their family member has died. Now, has that surprised you at all, or were you like, no, I knew what we had going?
Wow. I mean, I wouldn't say it surprised me. It really touches me, honestly. It really moves me. And I think what it speaks to is the power of compassion that people have in their lives, and also the power of imagination that people have. Because, as I said, it takes many, takes a village to create one of these movies, right? It's not just me. The writer, the script is the beginning, it's the foundation, if you will, but there's a lot more people involved. But that doesn't just stop when, the director calls cut and they wrap production, and it doesn't stop when the producers say, okay, we're locking picture and we're, this is the finished edit of the movie. That's not the end of the collaboration, clearly, right? Because the collaboration continues with the audience. And so,
oh, great. Yeah.
We're really fortunate that we have created this series that has engaged the imagination of the audience to the extent that they're collaborators in this show. Absolutely, right? From a creative or imaginative or compassion, the heart standpoint of this. So I'm really moved by that. And I hope that I'm able to continue to creating shows that have that kind of effect on people. But this is the challenge, right? If you really love something hard, when it goes away, who among us has not had a breakup, right? A love that's gone away, and then you think, I'm never going to fall in love again. That was it. Because this hurts too much. It hurts. But you know what? Isn't it fortunate that we don't feel that way? That we eventually get over that spiteful feeling, and, which is fundamentally a feeling of fear. We want to protect ourselves from being hurt, but that's impossible. We cannot protect ourselves. No one can avoid suffering. That's Buddhism 101, is no one can avoid suffering, because there's 4 major sufferings that Buddhism articulates. The first one is birth. So to be born is to suffer, and then sickness, and then old age, and then death. These are the 4 major sufferings, and we're all guaranteed to experience all of them at some point.
Awesome. All right. So I'm just gonna quickly touch and shift a little bit that going back a little bit earlier, that most of the fans don't understand the complexity that goes into making a Hallmark movie, and we just sort of oversimplify it, as we said before. And I think it's important for us just to really clarify that the decision to end the series wasn't just a matter of Hallmark being mean and evil and saying, you know what, we don't care about our audience. we're just going to move on because we really like, The Curious Cater, and we don't care about any of the old ones. It's far more complex than that, and it couldn't have been an easy decision. And I think it's an easy scapegoat, but I think it's important. And as you said, there's so many variables, but I think it's important to know that while they, like I said, they could have probably announced it in a better way, the decision was not one that was, made just lightly or on a whim. So, I don't really have a question, but I just think it's because Hallmark's getting beat up a lot. And, if history has shown Hallmark does care about their fans.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yes.
And so they wouldn't have done something to purposely upset their fans.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really important for me to say, you're absolutely right. This is a complicated, major, I mean, this is like, when your Swiss watch breaks, you don't open it up and try to fix it. I wouldn't open it up and try to fix it because I'd end up using a hammer, and then I would destroy it. It is a complex mechanism. There's a lot going on, and again, it's run by human beings too, so there's a lot of human factors. But so I don't even know what's going on. I mean, I think I shared this in the last podcast. I've never even been to the Hallmark headquarters in LA. Never in my life. I've been working with them for 5 years now, 6 years, and I've never, and I don't know most of the people that work there. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and so these are complicated decisions, and I don't even know. Believe me, I have no idea what all went into this decision, and quite candidly, it's not for me to ask. That's not part of my purview as a writer, as a storyteller. All I would ask of the fans is it's funny you use the term scapegoat, because I think everybody knows what a scapegoat is, or at least colloquially we use that expression, but literally this was an idea that, and you can read about this in the Bible, in Leviticus, where a goat would be sent into the wilderness after the priest had symbolically laid all the sins of all the people. So this was a way of absolving people of sins. They would say, okay, we're going to take all of your sins and we're going to lay them all on this goat. And then we're going to release the goat into the wilderness, and then we'll be free of sins. Now, that's a cool metaphor, right? But it's not really a cool truth, because it's not real. That's not how life works. And, goats can't take on, again, back to Buddhism, the law of cause and effect is strict. And you can't just pass all your stuff off onto a goat. And so colloquially, we have come to use the term scapegoat to mean someone who will take the blame. But that's an unhappy way to live. I mean, just not to put too fine a point on it. And I would just encourage the fans of Mystery 101 to just think for a second about when we made the first Mystery 101, and there was no guarantee that we would make a second one. None, zero. It was just to, take a flyer. We'll see how this goes. And it went well. It went well enough that we were really fortunate. We got to, make a second one. And then that went well. And we got to make a third, and so on, for 7 movies. 7 movies. It's a lot. That's a huge commitment, right? I mean, it's huge. So I would just encourage the fans who, again, not to discount their sorrow, but to really appreciate the fact that we got 14 hours to tell this story. That's enormous. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for it.
I agree. And when we did our reaction podcast earlier this week, Sydney, and I'll ruin the quote, I'll just paraphrase it, but she did a Dr. Seuss quote, which I think kind of summed it up. And it's like, let us, focus on being the happiness of what we had rather than the sadness of what we didn't have. And I'm just paraphrasing. And it's funny because as we've talked a little bit about the Buddhism, it seems like it kind of Dr. Seuss aligns a little bit with some of
Oh
the
yeah,
Buddhist
yeah.
things you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that acceptance and that
Oh yeah,
resilience.
no. Dr. Seuss is a total Buddha, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I think that is just a really good way. And as you said, yeah, I think let's be happy for what we had rather than angry and upset for what we didn't.
Yeah.
But that brings us to, I don't know if there's anything else left to talk about. Oh, one thing left. Okay, so it's not happening, it's collecting dust. Can you now help people with their recovery, help people sleep at night, help people feel a little bit better? And can
Sure.
you sort of tell us a little bit, we don't have to go page by page. If you want to, I have time. But can we just sort of take people through a little bit about what that episode 8 would have happened, a little explanation of Amy, we were left Amy looking at her dead fiance with Travis looking on. We talked before, it wasn't meant to end the series on that cliffhanger, but it did. So can you help people just a little bit with what episode 8 would have been?
Sure. Yeah, so I do want to say before that I think that a big part of the pain that people feel is their desire for a tidy ending, and of course this Mystery 101 pales in comparison to the fan reaction to The Sopranos, which to me, one of my big writing mentors is David Milch, and he said, I don't understand why people were so upset about that. That was the exact ending that the show had prepared us for, right? This is a show about where things constantly end abruptly and suddenly, and where also, like, there's a huge measure of absurdity in the show, and the show is really engaging in like the absurdity of life and dreams and all this stuff. So anyway, that was the ending that they got to choose, and it still infuriated people. And what they're infuriated by is the suddenness of it, right? And the untidiness of it. And so I do think that part of what is people are really grappling with now, and Mystery 101 fans, I mean, is the, that if episode 7, if Deadly History had ended with Travis and Amy saying, I love you, and fade to black, and then 2 years later, it's never coming back, well, that would have been okay with people, right? So I guess I just encouraging people to think about why that would be okay and this isn't okay. And what that says about each of us as a person, that, because again, life doesn't always end with a nice fade out and people telling each other that they love each other. So anyway, but that said, I'm not trying to dodge your request. So just to be clear, I never wrote episode 8. I just pitched it. I pitched what I thought would be the idea for it. And so that's all I have to share with you, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Okay, so we open with that final scene from Deadly History, the one that got everyone so upset. And as Travis looks at Amy and the thunder claps and she looks back at him, and we're on her and she's looking at him, and we hear his voice saying, Amy, Amy. And she wakes up with a start. She's fallen asleep at her desk in her office. It's night. Travis is beside her. She's disoriented. What's going on? What time is it? He says, it's almost 9. I waited for you at the restaurant, and then I tried calling a bunch of times, but you didn't pick up. And she says, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I don't even remember falling asleep. I just had the craziest dream. I was engaged and my fiance was murdered and you were investigating. And Travis says, so it wasn't me who was dead? And she shakes her head and he smiles and he says, good, then I'm not going to worry because you're engaged to me. and they kiss. And then we see the title card, Mystery 101, Killing Dreams. Amy explains the dream in detail, that she was engaged to Sam Jameson, who we learn was her real life next door neighbor and her high school sweetheart. And he actually proposed to Amy while they were in college, but she had turned him down. She was worried about his growing intensity, his obsession with her, and they were too young anyway. And honestly, they haven't spoken much since then. And Travis says, well, sounds like your class is getting to you. And then we cut to the next day to Amy in class, and she's teaching Agatha Christie's Poirot story, The Dream, about a man who dreams of his own death and then ends up dying. And so as class ends, Graham arrives to tell Amy totally shocking news. He's just heard from Mrs. Jameson that her son Sam is dead and he's been murdered. Then we end up learning more about Sam. Sam was this genius, a genius level person. I mean, she's like a 160 IQ, but had the first of several nervous breakdowns in college after the breakup with Amy. He's been in and out of hospitals, but has been very successful in the biotech world because he's so brilliant. He lived in Seattle, and Amy's really just distraught about this, and she can't sleep, and she insists that they go look into it. And fortunately, Detective Denny Roma from Dead Talk is the investigating officer in Seattle, so they have a way in. And there are several suspects, and there's a labyrinthine investigation, and honestly, I didn't figure all of that out. Right. That's sort of the part where I go, and then we find out who did it, and who did it. The killer turns out to be Sam himself, who staged his death after changing his identity and swapping his genetic signature in the lab. And the victim was an innocent man who matched Sam's height and weight, and he was thrown from a building so that no facial match could be made. Sam had been planning this for months. As soon as he learned that Amy had gotten engaged and had set a wedding date. And what we find out is that Sam has been in the movie all along, in the background, disguised with a beard and glasses and padding as a janitor at Elmstead, giving him access to Amy's coffee machine, her Nespresso machine in her office, which he used to drug her and hypnotize her while drugged, planting doubt about Travis and their impending marriage, and planting the dream scenario, which opens the film. And so once that's all resolved, we would have our final scene of the movie, which of course is Amy and Travis's wedding. So
that's fantastic. Chills. I literally got chills. I love the Agatha Christie nod in there.
Yeah. I mean, I love dreams, and some people sniffed it out on the internet right after it happened. Right after that episode aired, some people were saying it must be a dream, and I was like, it must be. Yeah. I mean, that's a great insight, because I love dreams so much. I mean, I'm a huge Wizard of Oz fan. I'm a huge David Lynch fan. I think dreams are so powerful. They're a way of working out problems that we have, but they can be ways where people can embed things into you, especially if they drug you and hypnotize.
Exactly. I'll say one thing interesting, and then you shared the Agatha Christie quote, which we're going to talk about in a second, is since we last talked, you recommended the ABC Murders, Agatha Christie. I watched that. Fantastic. You've got me. I never was into Agatha Christie for some reason, and I don't know why. I associated her with Murder, She Wrote, and just thought she was, I don't know, sort of corny. But as I'm starting to get more into this Agatha Christie, she's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, not to say everyone shouldn't just watch your movies, but Agatha Christie, that woman knew how to spin a mystery.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, she's the queen. I mean, she is the queen of crime. I mean, for a reason. I mean, she really I mean, there would be no Mystery 101 without Agatha Christie. I mean, I am a huge devotee, a disciple of Dame Agatha.
So, well, I greatly appreciate you sharing that. I think once again, a lot of people were making their own speculations. They wanted to, think happy thoughts. You had hinted that you promised it wouldn't be bad what happened in the future of Travis and Amy. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I also, going back to what you were saying before about people needing to have a tidy ending. When we were talking about our reaction, we did talk about Sopranos, not having the neat ending. Another one, what some people think may be the best comedy of all time, Seinfeld. That ending, wasn't the ending everybody wanted.
Right.
To have a final episode of a beloved show that is going to make people feel good, it may be an impossible task, because for the most part, nobody wants that show to end. They wish it could go on for eternity. And the reality is, we have the soaps, I guess, that have gone on for a long time, but every show starts and then every show finishes. And we have a favorite show, and then you know what? We may grieve, we may miss it, we like compare things to it, but eventually we find some other shows that we do like.
Right.
And some of them we may really like.
Yeah.
So, which is going to bring me to the next, oh, there goes my dog getting, barking probably at someone. I think he was saying, great job. Thank you very much, John. But so one of the things the reaction fans have had, and I think you're going to really help with this a lot, but they said, you know what, we're done with Hallmark. We're not going to invest in another mystery because it's no point in getting involved. They're just going to cancel it, or no show is going to be okay. Sorry about that. They say we're just not going to invest in another mystery because it'll get canceled, or it just won't be as good as Mystery 101. And I have two takes on that. Number one, I think that's a disservice to you and the other writers, because you created, now granted, as you said, it's a whole village. It takes everybody to do these, but you created these amazing characters and these amazing stories and mysteries. And to say, I'm not going to get invested, nothing's going to ever be as good again, I think is just a discredit to you, that saying, you know what, John, you did it once. I don't believe you can do it again. Right?
You're a one-hit wonder, man.
I have way more confidence in you. The Curious Caterer, you've shown, Francesca Quinn, you've shown that you can do a Hallmark mystery very well. And we just had the Cases of Mystery Lane, that was out, and that was fantastic. It was so good.
Yeah.
So, I just tell people, have trust in it. Just have trust. And it goes back, this is like, I guess maybe the reason why, like when we've talked about your Buddhism and I've read it, it just sort of really does all funnel back to it. It's that, that acceptance, that resiliency. It's going to be fine. There's going to be other shows we like again.
Yeah.
And then this is where the quote.
Yeah. And it, as you say, faith. I mean, it's a matter of faith. I mean, fundamentally, everything in life comes down to a choice between fear or faith. And I would choose faith, because it's much more fun.
And
anyway,
and this is and then the quote you shared with me, the Agatha Christie quote, that sometimes what you think is an end is only a beginning. And you shared that with me, and I immediately was like, oh my gosh, you have like news that there's like a spinoff or something. And you're like, no, it's just a beautiful, great quote that sort of sums it up. And it really does do it. And I think it's just, it's funny, because that's kind of the message we've been doing as people have been coming to us with a lot of, like I say, this upsetness. And it's there's so much more that's coming. Just be excited for what's coming.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think, as you said, you're turning me into this Agatha Christie fan, and it's such a good quote that I think
that's from the book, the novel Peril at End House. So but right. I mean, and that to me, it's this idea that sometimes what you think is an end is only a beginning is so beautiful. The Janus, the Roman god of doorways, is depicted with two faces because, and he's also the Roman god of duplicity. So he's sort of the god of detectives in a way. And but this idea that that they had this god devoted to be able to the passage through, right? The passages really matter. And don't, again, if you just think that's the end, that's not accurate, right? It's, yes, you're leaving one room, but you cannot, it's impossible to leave one room and not go into another room. And of course you can go into the other room of anger and recrimination, and I'm canceling Hallmark, and that's your, this is America, and you're allowed to do that if you want. But I would encourage you, as I would encourage the fans, as you are, Eric, to not do that, but to be open to what's next, and to also look at the fact that if you love this show so much and we're the people that made it, come back and see what else we get to do. And I'm certainly excited about the things I am working on right now with Hallmark, and I really hope that, Curious Cater being one of them, I wrote the first two, that someone else has written the third one that they're shooting right now. And again, that's just because of scheduling things. It's not like there's no secret conspiracy to oust me, something like that. And because I'm working with those producers on another project with Chris Palaha that we're working on together, and I really can't say anything more about that.
What I was saying. What can you share with us about what's coming up?
Well, right.
Anything?
So Chris and I are working on a project together. It's a mystery.
Okay.
And we're, that's really all I can and should say. I love, but we're working creatively on it together. He's a producer on it, coming up with the story together, which is different. And I love it. And I'm so excited about it. Oh my gosh. I'm just incredibly excited about it. And that's really all I can say right now about that.
That's plenty.
Further along in development is this project called Mystery Island, which I think I might have mentioned to you before.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah. And that's getting close to production. They're starting to look at they're starting to reach out about casting and nail down locations. They're going to be filming it, I believe in Panama, tropical island. And it's super. If you like Mystery 101, I really think you'll like Mystery Island, because it's so much. It's so deeply inspired by Agatha Christie. The premise is there's an island where people go to on vacation, wealthy people go to on vacation to play murder games on the island. And someone gets pretend murdered, and they pay a lot of money to play detective and on this beautiful tropical island and figure out who done it. And it's totally in the vein of what, it's hugely inspired by Evil Under the Sun and then There Were None, the two of the Agatha Christie Island mysteries. But this whole idea that there's this industry built up around it, and it's founded by this guy whose mother was a sort of a proto Agatha Christie character. She's this incredibly successful British crime novelist. So he's used his money to do this. Anyway, it's really fun. We have, and man, great lead characters. The female lead is a psychiatrist, UK, London-based psychiatrist, and really wonderful detective character. So I think people will really, a lot of the things that people really loved about Mystery 101 are in this show, but in a really different way. It's not a copy or a knockoff or anything like that. It's in many ways, it's quite different. But in many ways, at the heart, I think it really gets at deep questions about the human condition, which I think is what Agatha Christie was doing with her work.
Well, you did tell us about that when we talked last time a little bit. And Sydney, well, I'm excited too, but Sydney, man, she's hook, line, and sinker excited for that one. She just thinks the premise of it is so good. But you two also have that little British mystery,
Yeah, yeah.
connection, which I will say you guys are bringing me on board, because the more I experience them, the
Oh, I mean,
better I'm liking it. So
they're kind of the masters of it. I mean, that's where it all started. The golden age of crime novels started in England, and so we have British characters in this. We have a lot of Latino characters as well because of where it's set. So it's a
right.
really great mix, and I'm really excited about it.
So am I. So am I. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for agreeing to be on here. Thank you so much for sharing. Like I said, when I can see how you sell your scripts, by the way, because just the way you tell it, I was just tingling listening to you talk about it. So I'm sure that's part of, when we're going, being a little less romantic, but when you're selling, a script and trying to get it produced, I'm sure that comes into play too, not just, reading it,
Well,
but
it's
being
your
able to, get someone
Yeah,
excited
I
listening
mean,
to you
you have
talk
to
about it.
have the good skills, storytelling skills. I was fortunate, I used to be an actor in the theater, and obviously that's a big part of
Right.
it. But really, fundamentally, it's your passion. Like, right? I mean, I think the reason there's so much compassion for Mystery 101 is because there's so much passion that went into the creating of it, not just from me, but from everybody involved, and that carries over into this vast audience, starting with you, Eric. And yeah, thank you, man. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for having me on again and letting me open up about all this stuff, and certainly letting me talk about Buddhism, and for being such a curious person. The great American poet Walt Whitman said, always be curious. And
Thank you.
I really appreciate your curiosity. And to me, that's what elevates us and wakes us up. Buddha means awakened person. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything other than awakened person. And we're all just trying to wake up and be the best version of ourselves. So thank you for letting me do that a little bit
No,
today.
and I thank you for, like I say, sharing what you have. I do appreciate it. I do think of myself as a curious person, and I do like to absorb what I can. And I find, like I said, I just think there's a lot of really good in there, whether you want to become practicing or not. I don't think that's even,
That
at
doesn't
some
really
point
matter.
maybe, but
That's everybody's decision
right.
themselves.
But I think there's just so much interesting, helpful information in there. And like I say, especially through what people are going through now, that acceptance and resiliency. Everybody, well, heck, forget Mystery 101. Let's talk the world. Everyone could use
Yeah,
a little dose of that,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but all right. Well, good luck. Like I say, not a ounce of me does not think Mystery Island won't be crazy successful. The story, that whole plot sounds fascinating. I am very curious, I will say, as we end, and I think it's just because the recency, but people with their comments saying, I don't want to see Chris in another mystery. He's only Travis. I think with time, they
Yeah.
will move on.
That's
They will
again,
accept. He's an
that's
actor, right?
understandable. And that just shows how much they love Chris and how much they love the character of
Right.
Travis, really. But yeah, Chris is incredible. I mean, he's a fantastic actor. And it's fine that people say that. And this character that he's playing in this new thing we're working on, it's so different. It's so structurally different. Even tonally, it's really, really tonally different.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah,
I think,
I hopefully they'll come around.
yeah, a little bit of time, because
Yeah.
yes, the things, as you know, I joke about my Windy City mysteries all the time.
Yes, I
And
love
people
that.
are like, no, Chris can't be with Kate.
Anybody other than Amy.
He can only be with Amy.
Yeah.
That's the only person he can ever be with. And it's like, wait until you see him with somebody else and he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, oh, wait, but you know what? That's entertainment, right?
It's
All
cool.
right.
All good.
All right. Thanks,
Eric.
John. Have a great day.
You too.